Come on and help me welcome everyone joining us in person and online. Go ahead, make some noise. A little bit louder. Come on, you can do better than that. Even in your house. Come on, make some noise. We are so glad that you joined us here at the Block Church. Man, we are in a powerful series called Good at Life. Who's enjoying the series? Make some noise if you're enjoying the series. I'm telling you, Pastor Joseph, Pastor Mo, Pastor Joey last week, wow, it has been a fantastic series, and I cannot wait to jump in today. I have the honor and the privilege of talking about my favorite subject in the entire world, which is money. Now, don't run away. I know you want to run. You're really worried about what's going to happen. Don't worry. We're going to lightly touch on finances today, but good at life. Good at life. We're going to talk about finances today, and we're going to read out of Matthew chapter 25, starting in verse 14. Here's what the word says. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To the one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. Somebody say, oh no. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown seed and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here's what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, by the way, we're on a marathon. Stay with me. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have in abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. It's an interesting parable that takes an incredibly depressing turn as we read it. We go from a man who's going on a journey, who's giving his servants all of his wealth, which is amazing because, hello, who wouldn't want some rich person to give them all of their wealth? Come on, somebody. All the way to you wicked servant, go where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is a really, really crazy parable that may be incredibly uncomfortable for some people that are listening to me teach this, and even those in our culture today. We don't like things to turn that fast. We're not a fan of it going from really good to really bad really quickly. But the good news of the gospel is no matter if it's good or it's bad, we have Jesus with us to get us through. That's the hope of the gospel, is that the Lord is with us, He's for us, He's around us, and He has our back whether we're going through good times or bad times. It's interesting in this parable, Jesus uses a parable about money, about finances, to talk about His second coming. And I love that. He teaches that, hey, it's a man going away, and what he's talking about is I'm going away. Hey, I'm gonna go away. And this man will give his wealth to his servants. And Jesus, looking at his disciples who were his servants, and all of us were servants of the Lord. If we're believers, our goal in life is to serve Jesus, to serve his purpose, to serve his kingdom, always in all ways, right? Everything we do, we're doing it for the Lord. And so Jesus is saying, listen, this man gave away his wealth. What I'm doing is I'm giving you the wealth of the kingdom here on earth. When I leave, I'm giving you the Holy Spirit. And when I give you the Holy Spirit, I'm giving you everything that you need to do what I've called you to do. And as we see in the end here, you'll see that the man comes back to settle accounts. And here's the truth, quickly. Jesus will return one day to earth, and he will settle accounts with each one of us. What have we done with what he gave us? That's the question. What have you done with what God gave you? Look at your neighbor right now and ask your neighbor, what have you done? Just ask him, say, what have you done? Now, we don't have to answer that question because some of you don't want to, all right? So, what have you done? And that's what Jesus is gonna ask. And then there's a reward for those that have done something. And then we see near the end here what happens with those that have done nothing. But let me point this out. God never expects you to make something out of nothing. But he does expect you to make something out of something. God expects you to take what you have and what he's given you and to do something with it. There's not a single person that could ever say, I have absolutely nothing to give. I have nothing to work with. The Bible tells me that we each have talents. We each have giftings. The Bible tells me that I'm created in the image of God, in the likeness of God. In Genesis, it tells me that God formed me out of the dust of the earth, and he breathed God breath into me. Aren't you glad that God breathed his breath into you, that when you breathe in and you breathe out, that you are breathing the literal breath of God in and out of your lungs? There is no excuse to say, I have nothing to work with. So God expects you to take what he's given you and put it to work. Well, how do we make something out of nothing? Well, I'm glad you asked. I'm gonna give you 3 points that'll take me less than 2.5 hours to go through. So here we go. It's gonna be quicker than the scripture I read. Point number 1, how do we make something out of nothing? Well, the first thing that we have to do is we have to show up. We have to show up. Verses 14 and 15 says, again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one, he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another one, each according to his ability. So interesting to me because these servants here, they weren't chosen by chance. It wasn't by random that this man chose these particular servants to give his wealth to. No, these particular servants, they were selected because they had shown up. You're not going to entrust all of your wealth. You're not going to entrust the things that you've accumulated to just anyone. You're gonna give them to the person or to the people that you trust the most. Well, how do we trust somebody? We trust them by doing life with them. We trust them by being in relationship with them. We trust them by watching them, by seeing them, by hearing them, by knowing them. We trust them by looking at their track record. And if you never show up, how can I ever trust you? I don't know you through Facebook. I don't know you on Instagram. I mean, maybe I do because some of you, you're one person in person and then another person on social media, but that's a different message. See, we trust people by being in relationship with them. And if we're gonna make something out of something, we must be present. You've gotta show up for life. Right, here we are. We have all of life ahead of us. One of my mentors told me, he said, Jamey, the world is your oyster. You can do whatever you want according to the will of God. Right, as long as you're in relationship with the Father and as long as you have his heart, you have the ability to do kingdom work, right? You don't have to sit back and wait. You can go. You know why I believe that we can go? Because God, half of his name is go. We serve the go God. We don't serve the stop God. We don't serve the sit God. We don't serve the God that's saying wait forever. No, we're serving the God that says go. Is there a season to grow? Is there a season to learn? Is there a season to be mentored? Absolutely, that season exists. But for some of you, that season has lasted 30 years. And what I'm saying is it's time to get up and show up and do something with what you have. I love you, Holy Spirit fingers. Okay, all right, we're going, all right? We've got to show up. Proximity is power. When you show up, you get in proximity with people. Life moves at the speed of those relationships. When you're around people and when you're with the right people, your life will move quicker, your life will be better. You know, Pastor always tells us that life may not get easier, but it will get better, right? It depends on who you're in relationship with, on how good your life will get. Why will your life get better? Because when you come into relationship with Jesus Christ, it just gets better from there. But I wonder, who are you showing up with and where are you showing up to? See, that matters. You can't just show up. You have to show up in the right places with the right people. I've been a lot of places in my life. I've met a lot of people in my life. And what I've come to learn is that some people are for me to be in relationship with for the long run, and some people are for a moment. Some people are for a season. It's not that I'm necessarily better than them, because I'm not. And it's not that they're better than me. It's that we were meant to be in relationship together for a moment in time. So the reality is that the people that you're with today, some of them will not be with you when you go to the next place. Some of them are just not ready to be entrusted with the wealth. They're not ready to take the next step. I remember 3.5 years ago, almost, and I shared this when I preached here last year, but my wife and I, we were in insane debt. My wife had $125,000 in debt, but we made a decision that we were no longer going to live in that turmoil. We were no longer going to live under that pressure. We were no longer going to live a life above our means. And so we made a decision that we were going to cut back drastically on our spending. We were going to get rid of the unnecessary things in our life, and we were going to make a commitment to get out of debt. But with that commitment, we chose to be generous beyond belief. Here's what I learned real quickly. That a lot of people want to get out of debt. And a lot of people will make the decision to get out of debt. But not a lot of people will take the action to actually get out of debt. And as I began to surround myself with people that were saying, okay, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, what I realized is that many of them were a lot of talk and no action. They would show up to the debt cancellation party, but they wouldn't put any work. What I realized after that was our journey to get out of debt was through generosity. Well, even less people wanted to live generously. Even less people wanted to take the step of faith to say, I'm gonna give so far above and beyond that I'm gonna live in a way that pleases the Lord. There was less people who wanted that. So when I got to the end to my debt freedom journey, what started with what felt like a party, you know, there was hundreds of people on Facebook, on Instagram that were saying, Jamey, we're with you, we support you, you and Amber, you're gonna go a long way in this. When it got near the end, there was about 3 people around us. Why? Because not everybody wants to put in the work. Not everybody wants to show up and then do something, which leads me to, not only can you show up, not only do you have to show up, you have to stay invested in the process. It's easy to show up and say, I want to do this. It's a whole nother thing to stay invested during the process. Verses 16 and 17 says, the man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 bags more. See, they took what the man gave him. They took what this person gave them, and then they went and put the money to work. It wasn't just I showed up and I received. It's I showed up, I received, and then I did something with it, and I stayed for the process. It literally makes me think, as I'm teaching this, it makes me think about how there was some of us who showed up 7 years ago. I remember it like it was yesterday. And we showed up to Philadelphia. I remember Grace Ann being here. Do you love Grace Ann? Come on, make some noise if you love her. Yeah, My favorite LP. I'm just kidding, Matt. I love you too. Xavier, everybody, yeah, I love you. And I remember we showed up, and here Pastor Joey casted this vision of how we were going to go and take the city by storm with the gospel, and we were going to revive every block. And he casted this thing, and we're going to have 30 locations, and it was just going to be awesome, right? And as I looked around, and I have the picture, and there was about 20 of us sitting in a park here in Port Richmond. And as we sat in this park, it seemed impossible. But he casted such a vision of faith. And I remember, man, I showed up for this. And what I told him is I'll be here for a year. So I told Pastor Joey, I'll be here for a year. You know, and being somewhere for a year is good, but not a lot happens in a year. It's gonna take more than a year to win the city. You gotta know what you're signing up for. You gotta count those costs. And some of us, we talk big, but we don't have the action or the attitudes to back it up. But Pastor Joe, I mean, he was all in. And now here we are 7 years later, and it's interesting because as I look around the room, God has taken some of those people and he's led them other places, which is okay. There's absolutely nothing wrong with where they've gone. But those that have stuck here and stuck in the process and been around, can I tell you the fruit that we're experiencing in our lives is unbelievable. Little did we know that we would launch a church and it would actually go multi-site. Little did we know that we would launch a church and people would get off of drugs. Little did we know that it would actually, we had faith that it would work, but we didn't actually know if it was gonna work. Little did we know that the city would begin to open up buildings to us to meet in different places that were impossible to get. Little did we know that we would go to the Northeast. Little did we know that we were gonna head to West Philadelphia. Little did we know that one day South Philadelphia is gonna open. Little did we know that we were going to go through a global pandemic, yet God was still going to sustain us. Who is thankful? Come on, somebody. Who is thankful that you have stayed invested in the process with your relationship with Jesus? We can't just show up to the party and then leave 5 seconds later. No, we've got to show up to the party and we have to stay invested in what God is doing in our spiritual walk. We've got to stay invested with our money. We got to stay invested with our money. How do you multiply your money? You stay invested. You know, you buy low and you sell high. But what you don't do is you don't get invested with your money, and then when everything downturns, then you sell out. I remember last year I thought it was a really good opportunity to buy a particular stock, right? So all my friends in Paugh, leave me alone, okay? So you're gonna laugh at me for this, but I remember buying a particular stock that I will not mention, and this thing plummeted. And like most people, I got really, really scared. So when things go wrong, many of us, we turn to fear. And fear will never lead to a good decision, right? Anxiety never leads to a good decision. You need to be clear-headed. You need to be sound mind. You need to be in relationship with the Lord. You need to ask him to purify the mind. Because when stuff happens, we make crazy decisions unless we are grounded and founded in our faith, right? And what I should have known is that you stick through the process, right? It went down, but one day it's gonna go up. Well, Jamey sold his stock at a major loss. Well, little did I know, 1 week later, that stock actually ended up quadrupling from its current position, and it was 3 times higher than it was when I first bought it. What did I learn in that? What I learned is that I had to stick around during the pain, and I needed to stick around for the pleasure. I needed to stick around in tough times. I need to stick around when it's not going well. I need to stick around when it doesn't look good. I need to stick around even when I don't feel like it. Now, that's for somebody. That's for your neighbor. Even when you don't feel like coming to church, you need to come to church. Even when you don't feel like attending that block group, you need to attend that block group. Even when you don't feel like praying, you need to pray. When you don't feel like worshiping, you don't feel like fasting, you don't feel like hearing from the Lord, you don't feel like doing what you know you're supposed to do, you should do it anyways. Even when you do not feel like saving money and you want to buy a new pair of shoes, you need to save that money. Come on, somebody. Stay invested in the process. How do I know where you're invested? How do I know that you actually care about what you say you care about? How do I know that you're really about the thing that you showed up for? It's easy for me. All I have to look at is how long did you stay invested in that thing? In your finances, all I have to do is look at your bank statements. All I have to do is look at your purchase records. Where are you spending the most money? And where you're spending that money is where you're invested. It's what you care about. I want to tell you that when you're somewhere, you have to be there, and you have to be there all in. All in. Friends, don't show up to your block group physically, but then be mentally non-present. Well, don't show up in your prayer time with the Lord and being worried about the day. right? Wherever you are, this is what my youth pastor said, wherever you are, be there. You have an unlimited amount of time in each place in your life. And instead of worrying about what you're doing in the next place, be invested into that place. Spend time focusing. Spend time learning. Spend time growing. Spend time being invested. One of my favorite mentors that I had, and I've had many in my life, and I can't help but talk about them because I am who I am today because of those people. And I want to encourage you, if you've never had a mentor, find one, okay? Go seek them out. Go ask them to be a part of your life, and also just add value to their life, okay? Not anyone's just gonna stop what they're doing to spend time with you, right? I mean, successful people, they're busy. There's a reason they're successful, right? They're moving, they're shaking, they're making things happen. So go and add some value. But one of my mentors told me this. He said, Jamey, in life, he said, you've got to be consistent, you have to be persistent, and you have to do it over a long period of time with a really good attitude. And see, some of us, we show up for a moment, but the persistency, the consistency over a long period of time with a good attitude, man, the attitude thing, I wish I was preaching about attitude, but I'm not. If you're not in it to win it for the long run, then I don't even know if you're actually in it. I question that because it's gonna take time to see what we've been believing for come to pass. It's gonna take time. So I want to encourage you this fall, stay invested in your local church. Stay invested right here. Stay invested with your finances. Don't get off track. Don't get tired. Stop watching the news. Stop being in fear, and stay firmly planted right where you are, because you know that God has called you. You know that you have a purpose. As Pastor Mo told us, we have a purpose. We know we're headed somewhere, but we have to stay invested. How else do we make something out of something? The last point is, don't forget the interest. Don't forget the interest. So we have to show up, we have to stay invested, and we cannot forget the interest. It says, but the man who had received one bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Another translation says that he says the least you could have done, the very least you could have done, was given my money to the bankers. So interesting how quickly we get distracted in this generation. See, some of us, we struggle with paralysis by analysis. It has to be perfect. I'm not gonna make a singular move until it's perfect. I'm not gonna step out in faith and do what God's called me to do until every duck is in a row. And we get paralyzed by perfection. Others of us, we sit around and we spend too much time looking at what everybody else has instead of looking at what we have. Well, God, why did you give them 5 bags? God, why did you give them 2 bags? Lord, why did you only give me 1 bag to work with? God, you gave them so many talents and so many gifts. Lord, they can sing so well. God, I just wish I could sing like Pastor Derek. And I wish that I could preach like Pastor Joey. Lord, I wish that I was able to do this, that, and the other just like somebody else. But Lord, all you gave me was this. And we spend so much time in the comparison trap, as John Maxwell says, that we do nothing with what God actually gave us. If God wanted you to have that, then he would have given you what he gave them. But for some reason, God wanted you to have the talents and the giftings and the abilities that you have, so he endowed you with those. I cannot be anyone else but myself. All I can be is Jamey Paugh, whether you like it or you don't. And I know a few people don't, but that's in the hay. I can get better. I can grow. I can show up. I can invest. But at some point, I actually have to do something with what I have. Do not wait any longer. Stop looking around at all of the giftings and the talents and the abilities and the opportunities that everybody else has, and start looking at what God has given you. We all have something. And the least we could do is put it on deposit with the bankers. The least we could do is earn some interest. See, there's a power in putting to work what we have. They say that interest is the 8th wonder of the world. I think it's the 8th, maybe it's the 7th. Pass Yunk again. It's interesting because interest in the beginning is small. And it doesn't feel like a lot. But multiplication begins to happen when you pay attention to the interest. And many of us, we want the big, we want the grand, we want it all up front. We want the palace. As Joseph saw the palace, we want the palace. But we don't want to have to go through the trials and the tribulations that Joseph went through to get to the palace. We don't want to work with what we have. We just want to get to the end. But there's a power in the small thing. Do not despise small beginnings, friend. And do not forget the interest. Let me show you what happens with a little compound interest. Imagine that you start with $1,000 and you contribute $100 a week and you get 6% interest on that. So you put $1,000 in an account. I want to show you this. And then for every week, you just put $100 in, $100. And many of you go, "Oh, Jamey, I don't have $100. You know, put 50, put 25, start somewhere." The reality is I saw you in the line at the new Starbucks and, over at Fishtown Crossing. So you got the $100. I'm just telling you, all right? I've seen you in line. When the new sneaker drops, I saw you in the line. You have the $100. But anyways, so take $100 and get 6% interest. What happens in 20 years? Well, in 20 years, with a little bit of interest, you have $195,000 in an account. $195,000. You haven't invested but maybe half of that, and yet compound interest gets you to $195. But what happens if you determine, I'm gonna do that for 25 years? Same thing, start with $1,000, contribute $100, get 6% interest. Well, now instead of $195,000, you have $290,000. A difference of 5 years, and all of a sudden with a little bit of interest, you have $95,000 more dollars. You didn't invest $95,000 in those 5 years. You invested $25,000, $26,000, but yet you got an extra $95,000. What happens if you determine, I'm gonna do that for 30 years? Well, now you have $415,000. Well, what if I was gonna do that 35 years? Well, now I have $585,000. What if I was gonna do that for 40 years? Watch this. Now you have $815,000. See, the longer you show up and the longer you invest, the bigger return you're gonna have at the very end. And some of you are selling yourself short on the return that God has for your life, has for your family, has for your future, because you're giving up before you're supposed to. You're walking away before the end. You were supposed to stay invested another 5 years, another 10 years. You were supposed to be with us for longer, but instead you buried your talents, you buried your bag of gold, you buried what God gave you, and you didn't stick around for the process. My. Do not leave before you're supposed to. Do not quit on what God's called you to do. Do not walk away. You have so much life ahead of you. You have so many years ahead of you. God has something so great for you and your family. But if you forget about the interest, if you forget about the small thing, if you forget about doing the little things now, you will miss out on the grander thing down the road. You understand that being in church today, giving your life to Christ now, being in a block group now, serving today, giving it all you have, doesn't just mean God's gonna do something for you, it means he's gonna do something for your family. He's gonna do something for your grandkids. Do you know this is a generational thing? I'm standing here today because at 17 years old, in a snowy night in West Virginia, my grandfather gave his life to Christ on a church stoop when no one was around. He said, God, I'm gonna give it all to you. And he made a decision. I'm not gonna live for myself. I'm gonna live for the kingdom. And he began to preach the gospel. For 55 years, he led a church preaching the gospel. He went around the world. He went to leper colonies, praying for people, praying for the sick, believing they were healed. And he gave his life for the gospel. And can I tell you, he showed up, he stayed invested, he worked with what he had, and today the fruit of his labor is standing here telling you, do not give up on what God has for you. Do not walk away, because one day there's going to be another Jamey, there's going to be another you that is going to be produced out of your labor, out of your commitment. You know, a lot of us, as I close right here, a lot of us, we like to play small. We love to play small. And I played small there. I said, start with 1,000, contribute 100, get 6% interest. But you know that we serve a big God. We serve a God that can do it better. He can do it bigger. He can do it beyond. We serve a God that has the ability to do it bigger and better than we've ever imagined. You know, I said $1,000, $100 a week, 6% interest. And at the very end, at 40 years, if you said invested $815,000, but because God is bigger than anything we could do, what if you did that with your money and you got 10% interest? What's interesting is, you'll see there on the screen, if you went 40 years at 10% interest instead of $815,000, you'd have $2,344,970.17. And you didn't do anything else but then start with your $1,000 and put $100 a week. All that changed was the interest. And you know who's in charge of returning to you? Do you know who's in charge of the harvest? Do you know who's in charge of providing the interest? His name is Jesus Christ, and he will do it better than you can ever imagine. But you have to show up, and you have to stay invested, and you have to work with what you have today. I wonder, in every location, and those watching us online, I wonder, have you started your journey of investing your life with Christ? Have you started your journey of investing your finances into the kingdom? Are you there yet? Because if not, today would be a great day. At every location, if you will stand to your feet right now, no one leaving, everyone standing right where you're at. If you'll bow your heads and you'll close your eyes, there's people in the room right now, even those that are watching online. Maybe you're driving. Don't close your eyes, but maybe you're driving. Maybe you're in your living room. Maybe you're watching this with other family. And you say, Jamey, I haven't even started my journey. I haven't showed up to the party yet. I haven't given my life to Christ. Well, today is a good day. The Bible says if you will confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that you will be saved. So at every location, and those watching us online, if today is the day that you want to start your journey with Christ, you want to give your life to him, you say, I'm showing up today and I'm starting this thing. I want you to lift up your hand now, if that's you, right now. Come on, right now, we're waiting on you. We're waiting on you. Give you 5 more seconds. If that's you, you're saying, Jamey, I need to give my life to Christ. I'm not even in proximity with him, but I want to get close. Here's the good news. Jesus draws near to you. Jesus is waiting on you. Go ahead right now, lift up your hand if that's you. At every location, if you will say this prayer with me, let's ask the Lord, say, Jesus, forgive me of my sin. Make me clean. I'm sorry. I fell short. But today, I show up. I'm giving you my life. I'm making the investment. And when I leave this place, I'm going to use the gifts that you've given me. You're the Lord of my life. Thank you for loving me. In Jesus' name. Come on, will you clap those hands right now for all of those that are in the building that gave their life to Christ and those that are online? If you gave your life to Christ right there, will you put a hand emoji in the chat? Listen, life may not get easier, but it's going to get better.